Hey everyone, it is I, Heathen Queen. So I know that we were supposed to have two guests on today, and unfortunately, Dr. Karen O'Donnell sent me an email earlier today. Oh my goodness, thank you. Uh, she messaged me earlier and said that she had a really, really bad migraine. She lives in the UK, so it's already like 7 p.m. her time. And so we're going to reschedule with her, but Dr. Alexiana Fry is still here and willing to chat with us. And yeah, so we're just going to do that. And I'm trying to mute this thing and it's not working.
I don't know.
Can I hear myself?
Technology never works when we want it to.
Thank you. Okay. I'm like hearing myself in 3 different places, like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. Anyway, welcome to the show. I would like to say that I'm usually more organized than this, but I'm not. So thank you for being here, everyone. This is Correa, my wonderful producer, and Dr. Alexiana Fry. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Joy to be here. Yes.
I
love it.
We talked once before, and as a surprise to literally absolutely no one, I haven't released it yet. So we might cover some of the same topics, but it's fine. It's going to be great.
It's fine. It is.
Yeah.
It's live this time, so
I know it's live, so it's going to be way better. Probably, maybe. Who knows? Why don't we start with this? So, yes, it's an adventure, that's for sure. I don't think people come to my page for like any kind of non-chaos. It's all chaos here. So if you don't mind, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little about your background and how you got involved with the topic of trauma and theology.
Yeah, such a joyful topic, right?
So fun.
Yeah. My name is Alexiana Fry. I hail from the great state of Michigan. And we, right before this, I was downstairs packing my downstairs books as we are getting ready to move across the country and go to California. So I'll be near you, Heathen Queen. Very excited. We're going to party.
Yeah.
But I got introduced to trauma really as a hermeneutical lens. So as a lens in which to view scripture through my supervisor. So even before I went to start my PhD, I didn't know that was a thing. But as soon as I started exploring, it just clicked. It made sense to me. And, I am not a huge... I was told to pick a topic that I wouldn't get bored of in the years that it takes to actually get your PhD. And when you have experiences of trauma, they, like trauma does, it becomes a time collapse for you. And it's literally like a ghost that haunts, right? And so for me, exploring trauma as a way to not only reenact and heal myself, but also to offer that to other people. And in turn, really transforming me in my own theology and the way in which I view not only other people, but God themselves or herself. Not really interested in the himself, but there's that. Granted, I do come from a background where it would be only himself and that's it.
That's it.
So that is it. Cannot view God in any other way. So even having that opened up for me, and as Mary Daly says, when God is man, man is God. So really transforming my personal views as well as my theology. So that's a little bit of what I do in short. I personally explore texts through the lens of trauma, seeing if there's another way in which a new sort of interpretation will come out of that, in seeing not only ourselves as readers as traumatized and maybe seeing something into the text, but also what does it mean for an author being traumatized to write something? What does it mean for communal trauma? How are they mediating their own experience to the community? And how might that be different based on the generations? But personally, as a feminist, what does that mean as many texts? Sorry, there's a bug on my water bottle. As Heathen Queen and I have discussed in the not released, I have ADHD, so the bug was very distracting.
The bug is, it's going to be a real problem.
It was like, I'm over here. Yeah, I personally look through, especially in the patriarchal context from which the Bible is written, what does it look like and why do they choose women through which to not only depict their trauma and traumatic experiences, but also to traumatize. And what does that mean for women? What does that mean for women today? And how those texts are used in religious contexts, et cetera, et cetera. So it's fun. Just joyful
So if
stuff.
I remember correctly, something that you talked about a lot is the Sin of Gibeah. And I found that personally very interesting. So I was wondering if maybe you could, share with the class a little bit
Sure.
about that.
Sure, would love to share. Yeah. So
First, maybe what is it for people that might not be familiar?
yeah. Okay. So that is actually a big discussion in and of itself, because Gibeah is a place in Israel. It's in the Benjaminite area, Benjaminite tribe. But it's also very close to Judah and that section of Israel. So it's this multifaceted thing. Is this an event that is being talked about in the Bible? Is this a place that's just fraught with stuff and issues? What is this Gibeah? And actually, there's a very old article that discusses that it could be a myriad of different things. But I didn't find that there was much for us to really grasp with, unless we're going to go with that it's an event they're referencing that just isn't talked about. The other time Gibeah is discussed explicitly is Judges 19. In Judges 19, if you do not know about this text, it does exist in your Bible. And some of my work, does involve like how is it talked about in places that are religious. They don't do a great job, or they completely ignore it. It is not in any lectionary. It's just completely ignored. But Judges 19 exists. It is a text that depicts a woman, a concubine, so a secondary wife, and her husband is a Levite. They make those things clear. There's no names in this. It's very ambiguous. In fact, she leaves her husband. And in certain translations, so explicitly in the Hebrew, she's zonaz. So she is whoring or prostituting and leaving her husband. Sorry, I just saw that comment. Yeah, I am like 12.
Leave
She's at least 15, okay?
It's fine. She's zonaz, and in some contexts that can mean she had an affair, she is a prostitute, but in other ways, to be unfaithful to your husband can simply mean leaving. And based on what we do gather of the Levite, it is difficult whether or not, we don't know if domestic violence is occurring. We don't know if she's leaving because he's trash. Like, we don't know. But she leaves. She goes to her father's house.
He's probably trash. He's a man.
He's definitely trash. Okay, we will continue to unpack this trash Levite as we go on. The Levite wants to go speak to her heart. Fun fact, if you want to look up any time a man is going to go speak to their heart, which is why I connect this text even with Hosea itself, because Hosea is where the sin of Gibeah is mentioned. And Hosea also decides he's going to go speak to the heart of Gomer. Anyways, whenever that happens, violence is going
not
to occur.
Speaking to her heart.
No, it's not happening. And literally the only times the Levite is going to speak to her really in this whole thing, he only speaks in this narrative to the men. And there's one time he speaks to his concubine, and it's when she has been, I'll get to that. So he goes to the father's house.
It's way more Games of Thrones first.
Yeah, true. Very accurate. He goes to the father's house to go speak to her heart. The father gives grandiose welcome. He's there for like 5 days, and he's finally like, enough is enough. I'm taking her home. Takes her home. It's too late. And so now the servant is like, listen, we should stay over in Jebus. And he's like, no, they're not our siblings. We're not going to go stay in Jebus. So we love a good xenophobic moment. Not going to go stay with those people.
Sorry, it's not funny.
Because God knows what could happen there, right? So one of the papers I do talk about, like, whom shall we fear? Because of course they go stay with their brothers in Gibeah.
Yeah.
And that is where none of the people in Gibeah actually offer hospitality, which is already like what's going on here? Like, people are supposed to offer hospitality. And it ends up happening that an old man who is also not necessarily from the area, he's also a sojourner, but he lives in the area. We don't know why. Says, yes, it is. Very much so. He's an old man. That's the only marker we have of him. We do know he has a virgin daughter at home.
Thank God.
Another thing. Thank goodness, right? They are invited in, and not too much later, there's a knock, knock, knock on the door. The wicked men of Gibeah are there, and they would like to sleep, lay with, have sex with.
This is
the Levite.
Okay. Sorry. This idea is just so goddamn weird to me. Like, it comes up a couple of times in the Bible, like in the story of Lot, but like where there's just like roaming bands of men that were like super horny and were just like, I think I saw a virgin staying at this house, or like, are there just these roaming sex gangs? And then like we just hear about them like once in a while.
A bunch of like frat guys that just are like, meat.
Right.
But they want to sleep with the Levite? Is that what you said?
They want to sleep with the male. Yes.
Yeah, right. So like not only are they roaming sex gangs, they're also...
Yeah, they're not interested in the woman initially. And so there's some stuff happening here as well, right? Because as you mentioned, Judges 19, literally 69 Hebrew words are the exact same. They are identical to the Judges 19 passage. So they are one and the same, yet there are some differences, right? In Genesis 19, the bad men want to sleep with the angels. And in Genesis 19, the Lot's daughters are offered, right? And the daughters-in-law. And at the end of it, though, God saves everybody, right? This God figure saves everybody that's going on. But, not before the daughters are offered up, etc. Yeah. In Judges 19, the Levite literally seizes, before the girls are offered, both girls, just the concubine is grabbed by the man, It just says the man. So we don't know if it's the old man and we don't know if it's the Levite. Totally ambiguous. The man seizes the woman, concubine, throws her out, and she is gang raped throughout the night. Her hands literally, she tries to get back inside the house where it is safe, right? And really, for this woman, no place is safe.
Yeah, nowhere is safe.
She is not safe home. She is not safe in her father's house. She is not safe anywhere. Part of me questions, is she safe in Jebus? And they just decided we're not going to stay with them.
Right.
And her hands literally touch the threshold. So she is completely in the liminal space. We don't know if she dies just then.
Yeah.
Or later when the Levite comes out and says, "Get up, woman," like just addresses her like that. "Get up, woman." She doesn't say anything. So he picks her up, puts her on the donkey, and they get home, and he cuts her into 12 pieces, sends her off like mail to the 12 tribes of Israel. And we can keep going into
what is this story doing in the
everything.
Bible? Someone please why? Right,
Why?
it's fucking
It's a
rough
great
out here in
question.
these streets, and we're just gonna put it in our holy texts. Like, what the?
I actually appreciate what Drew Harrison said over here. Not for nothing, this sort
Yeah.
of thing happens all the time. And actually, Drew, it happens in reservations. Interestingly enough, when you bring up, I think it's the MWIW.
Missing murdered Indigenous women.
Yeah, MMIWG2S.
Thank you. This is the one statistic. So I actually talk about this in a paper of mine where I talk about the xenophobia that's happening in this text. And yet the problem lies within the tribes itself. And so they're very quick to say it's these people, it's those people that are the bad people, but it's actually something that they need to address within themselves, right? Sound familiar? I do a lot of work with migration. And so it's a very familiar trope to be like, those people are coming in and they're going to rape our white women. Those people from those other places are not, like, they're the not safe ones. And yet the statistics are all that. It's the white men, it's the people here that are doing those things. And interestingly enough, in reservations, it is not, I want to say the statistic is like 80% are people coming out. They're from outside the reservation. They are not from the actual reservation that are coming in specifically to murder and rape Indigenous women. Whereas in other circumstances, most of it is done by people you know, unfortunately, statistically. But it's fun. So, who are we told to fear and who should we actually fear? Well, question.
It's a question for the ages, I think. And also something you said earlier about where is this woman actually safe? And it resonated with me because I feel like a lot of us are still asking that question today.
Yeah.
It's gotten better.
I was like, I feel that in my bones.
Yeah. Where is she actually safe? Like, she is not safe clearly in her own home in Bethlehem with this Levite. She left.
Right.
For what? We don't know.
I mean, you have to imagine that if a woman of this time is leaving her husband, it has to be bad. Because you have no real hope outside of...
She's a concubine, so she is literally a secondary wife, but we hear nothing of a first wife or like a traditional... And I want to say there is an author who talks about how he probably got a concubine. She has not gotten pregnant either, so we don't know, and that's typically a thing. Like,
right, that's what
you got to pump out those babies, right? In patriarchal society. She has not had a child, and yet is she just specifically here for a pleasure toy for the Levite, right? Like, she is not a human in any right. She is secondary wife, concubine, sex toy for the Levite.
She's cattle. Like, that tells me everything that I need
think
to
about
know about what he saw her as a person, which means
no,
that
no, he didn't. None of them, no woman was seen as a person in this time. Like, not just,
No.
I mean, this woman was treated especially poorly, but like, if you, not you, but if, like, generally speaking, anybody thinks that a woman in Old Testament times was viewed as like a person, no, they're with the chattel, bitch. Like, that's like, it's in the Bible, that's what they're doing there. And like,
yeah, actually,
okay,
it was interesting because somebody said, and the tribes are outraged, but not that he offered up to get raped and dismembered her. They're not outraged because of that. In fact, what's interesting is there's some layers that are happening in the continuing chapters that end out Judges. Judges 19:30 ends with this huge cry from people who see these body parts. Like, never have we seen anything like it. We've never seen anything like this since we came up out of the land of Egypt. We need to talk about this. We need to discuss her. It's literally a feminine suffix. We need to discuss her, and we need to do something about this. This can't happen again, right? So it's there, never again. And then literally what happens in the next 2 chapters is men continuing to respond with more violence.
I can't, what? No.
What? Right?
Men responding with,
fact,
no
what's
fucking
interesting
way, dog.
is when they ask the Levite for his account, he doesn't really mention that he is the one that dismembered her. And in fact, he really talks about his outrage at him being potentially raped, right? Like, he was almost made to be feminized.
Oh, God.
And
some harm
so
could have
you're
come
like,
to me.
what are they actually outraged about? Is it the potential that a man could have been feminized in this way, right? Or is it the actual woman? And so it's sort of ambiguous from there. And of course, they continue to perpetuate violence with more violence. And so instead of just one woman getting raped and dismembered, which is enough, they then take all of the daughters of Shiloh, and they give them off to men of Benjamin because they almost killed the entire tribe of Benjamin, right? So they've got to repopulate. But how do they repopulate? They got to steal women. So they kill all of the men that they could have belonged to, and then they bring them back in. And so they're continuing to perpetuate this cycle of violence and injustice against women. Like, they are literally just using the women back and forth, shuttling them across in order to make their point. And of course, it ends with that whole, there wasn't a king. Like, what do we do with that? Only for us to get into Samuel and find out that they just do the same thing to women. Like, this isn't just there's no king issue. This is an issue.
Solomon had 500 concubines.
I just have to say this, and I know it's super not high level at all, but every time I think about the men back then and then all of their wives, like, or like just the people I guess their wives, the people they're sleeping with, all I can think is how badly these men must have smelled. And like, oh, oof, buddy. Like, that's what I think of when you're like, was she just a pleasure toy? Like, it's horrifying and disgusting and like depressing. And I'm sitting here like, God, that man probably smelled the high heaven. So anyway, sorry.
For real though.
No.
And so in all of that, you go.
Not only that, but they are also probably horrible in bed too, because it's all centered on their pleasure and they don't give a fuck about the woman at all. So like, I think about the fact that like Solomon had like 500 concubines. They probably had one experience with him ever that was like fucking terrible.
Yeah, well, thank God
was put up,
it was only one. Like, I mean, it's still horrible, but like,
it was like they offered up their virginity and he took it, and then they got put in the house with all the other concubines.
The harem, yeah.
Like,
yep, they don't get to see your family. You're just in this house in case you get called on again.
Love it.
So nice. And I think what's interesting about all that, no, you're okay, is like you see all that and you think, right? Like, what then is the sin of Gibeah? And for us as modern readers, we go, well, of course, it's the gang rape and dismemberment of this woman. But they probably wouldn't have seen it necessarily in that way. The ancient text probably readers, right? And so you sort of have to bring up, okay, so what's going on in Genesis 19 and what's the difference in Judges 19 where God doesn't show up? God's not coming to rescue this time. So what's going on? What's happening? And then
God never showed up for women, so we could just ding, file that away. But God's not showing up to save women ever. And also, that is the truest point I've ever. If y'all don't know what the Fit and Fresh podcast is, first of all, don't you dare give them any views. But they are just this terrible, like, round table of men that are like,
because we need more of those.
Yeah, dude. If she doesn't like put out, then just like I would kick her out. Like, first of all, you have a crop circle on your head, bitch. So shut the fuck up. But like, also, he does. He like paints on his hair, and then he's giving out these fucking terrible dating advice, like dead ass, like neg her to death so she knows that like she's not that important to you. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, sorry. I'm never, ever gonna get monetized with a mouth like this. But that's fine. I don't care. So anyway, but yeah, that Fit and Fresh podcast is basura. Like, don't ever watch that ever. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I am going to ask, are they part of its particular denomination? Because
no, they're not.
So I have research
religious.
to do. So
no, they're not religious. They're like
okay.
They're just men with a microphone that they shouldn't have. But anywho.
Microphone.
Yeah, anywho. Sorry, let's go back to the Bible. There's plenty of bad people there to talk about.
Sure, there sure is. Yeah.
There sure is. Like, that's one thing that on that one of our on Holy Trinity, one of our co-hosts, Red Sage, he was the first person to really talk, or at least I heard talk about how like the entire Bible is written through, like, it was never intended for women to read it. Like, because they were seen basically just a notch above livestock. Like, I'm a writer. I don't ever anticipate a time that like my dog's going to be able to read my story. You know, like that's just not like an expert. Like, I would love for science to advance and like for us to like learn and like be able to teach dogs. That would be great. But, you know, like that's just not an expectation they ever had. So the entire Bible is written through the male gaze, and the damage that does is
the elite male gaze.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So sorry, maybe we can circle back to like what actually is the sin of Gibeah, right? Like, what do we actually, like, I know what people automatically think it is, but like it doesn't appear to be about the violence towards the concubine, right? They don't care about her. That's
not necessarily.
I feel like it's on the same level as like slaughtering a cow. Like that's how it feels when they're talking about it, right?
She is property, right? She's property of the man. And so if they are actually upset about this happening to a human being, technically they're just upset that you destroyed his property.
Yeah, it's so
even though he destroyed his property. Anyway.
Well, he had to do it, obviously.
Obviously. She's tainted goods. And you know, that's part of the problem, right? And I think we've talked about this too in the short time we had together. Short time. It was long. We just kept going. What's hard about that zonah word in the very beginning is that you have one group of people where she is being unfaithful, she's whoring, she's prostituting, who are like, no. Like, that means she's she just left him, right? So we need to make sure she's not morally compromised so that when this outrage happens, like,
we can feel bad about it.
Right? She was a good person, but like, it shouldn't happen to even people who did leave their husband or have sex with somebody else. Like, this shouldn't happen no matter what. And again, it sounds very like victim blamey, familiar to some of the conversations we have today. Like, oh, well, this guy shouldn't have gotten out of the car. Like, the cop wouldn't have shot him then. Like, he needs to follow the law.
I mean,
no.
It also still, it sounds like, so as someone who like watches true crime all the time, don't at me, you see it so much where like up until very recently, and not even all the time now, like, first of all, they call sex workers prostitutes, and like the police, when they start disappearing, police just don't care. They don't look into it.
They're
like, well, she was just a street person. She was a sex worker, a prostitute, not even a sex worker then. So like, nah.
Like, she's not
right,
rapeable.
exactly. And like, she was probably on drugs. So like when they disappeared, there's like no real push to find them. And like it takes these bodies to pile up before anyone thinks like maybe I should look into the fucking 15 sex workers that have all been murdered. Right? Because there's this moral value assigned to it where it's like it's okay to sell your body in a factory every day, but it's not okay to sell your body in a hotel room. And I'm not saying anyone should or should not be a sex worker. I'm just saying it's a legitimate form of work. So like,
yes,
go for it. The fact of the matter is though that like we live in this, God, like, has it gotten better? Yeah, but it's like you can feel the puritanical roots of like our views on sex and women and sex and all this.
Well, you even have the virgin daughter who's in there, right? And she is technically offered up. You know, good for her that the other woman got offered up. But there's actually this poem written by, I'm going to butcher her name, Lyra Van Cleef Stephanon, who writes both on the perspective of the virgin daughter and the concubine at the same time. And of course, the concubine's words are gone mid poem. But the virgin daughter continues, and she's just looking on like, my father offered me up as this prized thing to be violated. That could have been me. And so there's this level of like, when I think about like white evangelicalism, we prize that purity culture, like nothing bad should happen to her. And even some of the stories and memoirs that I hear, testimonies of women who are not sexually active and then rape occurs, right? They are more believed because, oh my gosh, something actually bad happened to them, right? Actually bad. Whereas women who are sexually active before and then got raped were like, well, you were sexually active, so like, did you want it?
What were you wearing?
Yeah, that's how that works.
Did you enjoy it?
Did you say no?
Clearly you know how sex works, so of course you enjoyed it, right? Like,
sorry. Clearly you know how sex works, therefore you wanted to be assaulted.
Right. And so there's some interesting pieces, and of course, as everything works together, you know, then you have when it comes to purity culture, how that goes hand in hand with white anxieties, and we're facing a lot of that currently now. You know, we need a domestic supply of infants, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
So that was super uplifting. Love that.
Sin of Gibeah.
Okay.
So,
well, like I didn't realize that David raped Bathsheba until I became an atheist. Like that's how like desensitized we are to like you know, like we're not even taught about like unfair power exchanges. You know, if we did, like we might start opening our eyes to the abuse that I had no idea. And then I became an atheist and I was like reading this again and going, wait a minute. What?
This isn't adding up. This is not right.
There's no way she could consent to that. None whatsoever. Like,
nope.
Yeah. Women, there wasn't a concept of a woman consenting to anything then. It wasn't a thing.
There wasn't
like,
an
asking
option.
A woman. No, and like, why would you ask a woman what she wanted? Well, it didn't matter what she wanted. Just like, yeah, sorry. So before, just before you were saying the Sin of Gibeah, and I wanted to finish that.
So interestingly enough, you know, we have very similar texts, Judges 19 and Genesis 19. And of course, you know, many homophobic people love to quote that, you know, the man wanted to come in and sleep with the man. So obviously the sin was more homosexuality, which you know, even the Bible takes care of right away. Like Ezekiel clearly states the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was inhospitality, which is accurate. And so when you parallel these two texts and God doesn't come and save, you have to reckon with the fact that their own people were not were inhospitable to their own people, right? Like within their own society, they were so sick that they couldn't offer hospitality to one another. And in fact, like there's so much fracture amongst them. And so when I discuss intergenerational trauma and all of that, I actually see Genesis 19 as more of a folk story that is then remade through a new lens, through the lens of exile, right? And the woman's body is Israel. And she is being ruined by Israel. But she was unfaithful, so she probably deserved it, right? Covenant. And she is then dismembered by themselves. Like they're their own fault. They are their own fault. And really, when we think about trauma, self-blame is the easiest way to get through something like that, because what can you control? Yourself. And so when you, even though let's recognize some power dynamics in the covenant, right? Like if you have this all powerful being and really, anyway. And so through the lens of Israel, you have Israel who is to blame for what happened. And her body is dismembered into diaspora and spread all throughout the land, never to be brought back again. And that is their tale, right? And then in Hosea, you have them talking about the sin of Gibeah, the sin of Gibeah, the sin of Gibeah. Well, what is that, right? And it's this concept of like you're eating yourself alive, and yet the whole issue is that you don't see yourself even in the other. And that goes for the gendered other, the ethnic other. And I'd like to think Hosea was as woke as that, right? But that was what I would hope that they see the sin of Gibeah as, right? If, for instance, if the Sodom and Gomorrah story and the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is inhospitality, then what more has happened in the Judges 19 story that they are so fractured and so broken that they would do this to themselves, essentially. And so even through the body of Gomer as Israel is, and Hosea as this God figure, right, is being abusive to Gomer. And in fact, it turns into this interesting piece where you go, if they are depicting that, if in a patriarchal society that maybe isn't seen as abusive, right? But all social workers are going, that's DV, that's domestic violence. If maybe they were able to see it, maybe, and this is my maybe proposition, maybe the whole tale is this big giant story, the sin of Gibeah being this massive, what are you doing, God? You're abusing us. The covenant is abusive, all of it's abusive, and we have completely imploded.
Yeah. So
through the body of women, which I don't love.
Yeah, so that was going to be sort of my next question there is like, so I do want to get to some of the questions, but something I've been thinking about recently, and I know that it's something that you talk about and are interested in, is how the female body is used as a vehicle for trauma in order to, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, in order for the male character arc or trajectory to sort of continue, or for them to learn from, to grow. Meanwhile, as soon as that woman has sort of
played her role,
the brunt of that trauma, and the lesson has been learned, she's then tossed out. Don't care about her anymore, never think about her again, right?
Yeah, and you think of Rahab, right?
Right. Even if these aren't, historical stories, and even more so if they're not historical stories, you're making these stories up. There's oral traditions, and it's intentional that you're selecting women to be this vehicle for suffering and pain. And it's not for their benefit. It's for the growth and
of
maturity
the male figure.
of the men.
Yep.
Right.
It's
I just think it's worth
interesting.
thinking about.
I have this shirt from, I think
Women
it's called
are
the female.
collateral.
Yeah, they are. I have this shirt from, I think, this organization called the Female Collective, and the front it says self-love, and on the back it said, women are not training ground for your men to become better through us, right? Like, essentially that.
Right.
Because it still happens today. We're still told, like, oh no, the guy can do that, you're just here to like help him get better, or we just mature more quickly, like just let them, boys will be boys, just let them. And even like growing up, you're told, well, like, just help the man that you're going to be with, he's not going to be figured it all, like help him figure it out. And
if there's one thing that I've said, I think more, I haven't had to say it as much recently, because I think it finally, like, when you start saying it enough, I think it sort of begins to resonate with people. But like, I am not here to make anyone a better man.
No.
I'm not here to make anyone a better man, right? Or a better person for that matter. But it's usually not other women that I'm being asked to sort of
help make better.
Right. I don't need to make them better. Right? Like, I'm not asked to compromise so that other women have the chance to learn and get better, and then they move on to the next person or whatever, right? And they learn some other lesson. Like, that's why I say this, that I'm not here to make anyone a better man, is because as a straight woman, or like mostly straight, I'm not ever asked to make women better, right? I'm asked to come to a relationship and basically not only have done all the work for me, but to then hold space to have them do the work, and usually at my expense.
Yes.
And I don't know how to explain that to someone who hasn't been a woman in heterosexual relationships for her entire life. Like, it's always that way. That, like, and even my mom would tell me that stuff, right? Like, well, he just needs to learn.
My
he has
mom
to
and
grow.
my grandma, that's just like, you just gonna get used to that.
Even like friendships I have, like,
Yeah.
Yep.
And like, that's the
I'm
thing,
told
right?
that from a young age.
Yeah. It's like, effectively, it was never about how I'm going to get to fuck up and they're going to give me the space for that and help me and forgive me and, allow me to grow. It was always like, you can pretty much expect that any man you get into a relationship with is going to fuck up, and it's probably going to hurt you. But that's just a part of his like growth. And so if you want to be with him, if you want a relationship, like, you have to be willing to help him grow. And the thing is I think that we should all be willing to help each other grow, but it should not be this expectation of you get into a relationship with a man and now, like, you are here for his growth and evolution. And yours is a secondary thing that, we don't really talk about it. Like, we just assume that you'll grow.
The way that I've had it, or like I've heard it from people, is that like you want to make sure that you want to be with the person that you're currently like with, and not who you hope they'll be one day. Like, if they choose to want to make changes, you want to be able to like support them, but like as they are right there, like, you should want to be with them.
Right. And for people in the way I grew up, it was, they'll get there.
Yeah, like,
just settle now. And what's interesting about all of that too is growing up in that white evangelical space, it is supposed to be this mutual thing. But what's interesting is they put most of the burden, if not all of the burden, on the woman when it comes to all of this. And yet, so we're supposed to be the reason why our husband becomes this grandiose thing, right? And yet we're not allowed to do anything in the church other than teach other women and children. Which, ironically, again, if we're also the most fragile, why are we allowed, us horrible beings, why are we allowed to help the most vulnerable of us, right? If we're the most uneducated, terrible things, how are we in charge then of these vulnerable creatures?
Yeah.
I don't know. All of the logic for me doesn't add up. But
I think about it a lot because you'll hear so many of these stories come out of the church where women were abused by their husband. They went to the pastor, the elders, and the elders, pastors basically said, you know, you guys have to work it out effectively, right? Like, I mean, there's different ways of saying that, but it wasn't like, oh, you need to get out of that situation immediately. It was like, you need to try to not make him mad, or you need to do more therapy, or you need to forgive him.
With a post, which Desiring God is John Piper's thing, just came out with a post in the past week or so about how if you have a man that's harsh with his words, just pray for him, right? Like, stick it out and pray for him.
Pray, buddy. Out loud.
Even
if you're not gonna like it.
Even if like they're abusive, like there have been like men who have been physically abusive to their spouses, and the women are just told, well, if you were a good, you know, like you just need to pray harder, you need to submit more, you need to.
Well, that was sort of my point, was that like we see these cases come out, right? Okay, men or the husband is being physically harmful to the wife, and they give them all these bullshit solutions that are actually not solutions at all. Can you imagine if it was in a home where the woman was like hauling off and hitting her husband with some regularity? Like, can you imagine she would be
a whole thing
in prison? Like,
yeah,
like that would be it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Because like the church that I grew up in was actually super progressive, because like they took like Ephesians 5 of like the men being the like head of the household, and like the woman being like the church, and the man being like Christ, that they took that as it meaning that like since Christ is supposed to die for the church, that if it came down to it, that if a man really loves his wife, that he needs to be willing to do what it takes to make her happy and like take away her stress. When like that is not like the message that the vast majority of people are told.
No, definitely not. Okay, so sorry. I want to take some questions because I did tell Alexiana that we would stick it to about an hour. And I know we have a bunch of questions, so I'd like to get through at least some of them. I also quickly wanted to say, because I've been seeing these in the chat from a couple of different people about the abuse that they've experienced at the hands of their ex-husbands and how they're still trying to heal. I'm so sorry that happened. I wish I had any, like, I don't have any words to make it better, but I don't want it to go unacknowledged that like that's awful, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I'm also sorry, I'm reading about this comment about trying to get my Christian friends to treat the childhood sexual abuse in our circle as any more serious than the sin of telling a lie. Like,
millstones. Millstones.
Yeah. I just there. I don't really want to get emotional, so I'm going to try and keep it in.
No, it's okay. It's why I'm dissociating. It's fine. It's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I just told you a story that's in the Bible, right? And yet, how many people can relate to this story? How many people are sitting there going, yeah, these things are still being taught while Judges 19 is being heralded, right? Like, these ideologies are still happening today, and too often the Bible is wielded as a weapon for it to continue. And I don't no more. Without it being this performative outrage, because it's not for me. This is my life work. I will be making it my life work. It is my life work. Never again. As much as I can do, never again. I've seen too much, and I know too much, and I know half of that is still yet to be uncovered. No more.
Yeah. I just like, I always knew it was bad. It's always been bad, but it does seem recently that more is coming to light. Which I'm glad that it's coming to light. It should all be uncovered, and every single one of these motherfuckers should be taken to task. But like, they won't, but they should be. It's just, I experienced sexual abuse, but not in the church. So that at least was one thing. But like just reading these accounts coming out from the church, it is overwhelming and exhausting. And I don't say that flippantly, like it's so exhausting. It literally makes me
it literally
like
is.
I want to just go to sleep after I read some of this because the emotional toll it takes on me. And I feel like I know this was a question we were going to talk about with Karen, but I think like you were saying, a lot of trauma work is witnessing, right? Like seeing. Sorry.
It's okay. That is a very real response to.
It's just so exhausting.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, even like so the SBC,
and I don't know how people do it like
SBC.
all day, every day. How do people do this?
Well, the SBC, I mean, like they're literally talking about kicking out like 2 churches because they have female pastors, and
meanwhile they have unchecked abuse that is just running rampant.
Those are getting kicked out, and yet over 700 pastors and leaders within the church with countless children in that report. None of those churches, like no, but 2 women speaking as pastors, like
Yep.
Well, and beyond just that, it's beyond just the like we're gonna kick out these churches because women are pastors. Like, yeah, that's shitty. Don't get me wrong, but like, I am far more concerned with how these like public squawk boxes for the SBC are just doing everything they can to just discredit the report. Like, instead of saying, I mean, one of these guys genuinely said, I don't remember who it was right now, but genuinely said, women and children are going to be abused anywhere.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. That was the lawyer that was like, it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah. So, like, this is an acceptable price to pay for power, effectively. That's the argument, right? Women or children
many were very upset
price.
that money that would go to help support survivors that have been affected was going to be taken away from their missionaries. Like, what's more important?
Yeah, you don't
colonization or
missionaries. Actually, you don't need missionaries if when you're bringing them into a church, you're going to rape them. You actually don't need to be doing that. Like,
yeah, we need to protect children from you.
Yeah,
I do want to address this comment here of how many therapists tell abused women to go to church for support. A lot do.
I would actually reverse that.
Well,
how many churches tell women not to go to therapy for support and to stay in their abusive situation and to continue to be gaslit about their situation instead of having a therapist tell them the truth? Like,
absolutely, but I also just want
I think the other really dangerous
thing. You keep the other
really dangerous thing is
this concept. It's not my show, so it's okay.
Oh, sorry, and you froze on my end, so I didn't hear you talking. So I was just talking before you came back on screen. Please go ahead.
So it's okay. Oh, I was just going to bring up the secular
but please continue.
project. The Secular Therapy Project. I want to highly recommend both Recovery from Religion and the Secular Therapy Project, because all of us deserve the right to have a therapist that isn't going to try to push any kind of beliefs on us.
Yeah.
And so that was all I was going to bring up, is that is something that I would highly recommend looking into, and also recommending to people who are looking for help that aren't wanting this to happen. Yeah. But yes, the reverse absolutely happens.
I wanted to say that something else that I think is incredibly problematic is this notion of, and I think it's probably beyond just Christian, but Christian is my experience, Christian therapists, right? Or Christian counselors.
Who just commented, and the therapist better be a Christian therapist if you talk to one.
Yeah, and so like the thing is that you'll see, and I see this a lot, see it in Baptist circles. It's not just Baptists, but this is who I'm seeing because they're so loud and annoying in public. Where they're saying like, you know, you need, like, you only need biblical counseling. Everything you need to be counseled is in the Bible. And it's like, okay, so you only need, like, do you only need the Bible for, like, brain surgery? I'm just asking. Is that, like, because the Bible clear about that? And so, like,
Surgeon us to, like, open up a certain verse.
It works. Right, because, like, for a lot of these Christian counselors, they don't have any qualifications. They're just like people that read their Bible and then just think highly of themselves. Honestly, like, that's effectively what it is. Or it's just a pastor who doesn't have any qualifications, no mental health qualifications, and then but that you're their spiritual leader, so you go to them for advice on everything, and the advice you get can be really, really dangerous. Yes. That all being said, sorry, if this probably differs at different places in the country, I'd imagine it has to, but, like, I live in California. My therapist, I'm pretty sure, could get, like, kicked out of her profession if she told me to go to church. I mean, she wouldn't, but, like, I think what it would be closer to is her saying, like, well, maybe you should find a community doing whatever, right? But I think in other places in the country, I'd imagine that it's probably very normal for people to say, like, yeah, you should try going to a church and, like, you know, being a part of a community. But you really don't see a lot of people in the church encouraging folks to go outside of the church. And you especially don't, like you said, or someone said, sorry, it would be like you to a Christian, because they're the only ones that can understand your spiritual worldview. Okay. Do they understand psychiatric drugs? Because, like, that's, like, if I hadn't been put on antidepressants at some point in my life, like, I actually don't know if I'd still be here. Like, I don't know if I'd still be here. And I think that's true, unfortunately, for a lot of people. I mean, maybe not, but from people I've spoken with, like, a lot of folks are saying, like, if I hadn't gotten on antidepressants at some point in my life, like, I'm not really sure what would have happened. And you cannot Bible your way out of clinical depression.
No, you can't.
You can't.
You can't.
Anyway. All right, this is an amazing discussion. I do want to be respectful with Alexiana's time, because we are getting very close to that hour, and we do have a few questions.
Please.
This first one is actually very interesting, probably because I really find, like, friendships interesting, but also I'm a TV nerd, so. And it says, would women have had better friendships back then, or out to get another like we see in our TV and some circles today, or mix of issues?
See, what's funny is there are people who do study, like, relationships and, like, friendships in scripture, and that is not me.
Yeah.
So there are people who do talk about this, but I would honestly say a mix of issues. I think people are as complicated. You know, we have people still today who believe in their own oppression, are in complementarian churches. Like, so you have people who are still going to compete with one another for whatever, and yet they are in a much more agrarian, completely different context than what we live in today. And so they did count on one another for each other's survival. And so there's this level of yes and no. It's going to be a mix, just based on simple things that I know of the ancient time period. You need one another, and yet there's still going to be, you still have, Hagar and Sarah. Think about the power dynamics there. Could they have been friends? Is that even a thing? And yet you see Hagar, who's like, haha, I can bear children. And, so there's these levels and yet Sarah is going to, Hagar is a slave being used sexually, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole host of things, right?
I mean, like, when you see with, like, Naomi and Ruth, and, like, how close, how close they are.
And the question is that because of another power dynamic thing? We like to paint Ruth out to be this perfect story, this very storybook, like, it was terrible. And then she turns her life around and blah, blah, blah.
It's the chick flick of the Bible.
It is the chick flick of the Bible. And yet there's some interesting dynamics even within that I think we need to explore further.
There's actually a question in there about Ruth, so that might be a good segue.
Ooh.
Let me see.
Did you see that one? Where is it?
I'm like looking.
Adam,
I wonder if Alexiana has a brief overview of a feminist trauma reading of Ruth. My church growing up spent like half a year on that book with a very Calvinist reading.
Love a good Calvinist reading, right? So the where you go, I go, where you stay, I stay, your God will be my God. That is Ruth essentially converting, right? But then you got to zoom out. So Moab, she's a Moabite. Moab is now in famine. So there's this level of, and her husband has died. And now Naomi is moving back to Bethlehem, and Ruth feels this either kinship or power over, or is just sort of like, we can call her benevolent, but there's this level of, does that have to be her conversion, or is she just showing this really beautiful loyalty? And yet at the same time, she also, on this feminist level, starts to pick up this mantle that, it's so complicated. I'm like, how many avenues can you go with the feminist trauma? And now I'm like, I'm going to dig into this further. Maybe I need to do some work on Ruth, because I love Ruth. I have it all translated actually in this filing cabinet over here, so I can just pull it out. But even in it, it's interesting because that's where the word Shaddai is from. So she calls upon the provider, right? But when you think of Shad, Shad is breast in Hebrew, and I is plural. So it's the God of many breasts that she's calling out to provide, right? She's calling out to this very feminine God to provide breast milk, to provide provision, to provide fertile grounds in the midst of a famine. So there's many feminist aspects of Ruth in general. She's playing a very male figured role in most of it. And is
I really want to talk to you about Esther now too.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like we could talk about for hours. Okay.
Yeah. Esther, come on out, because she is real good at sex. That's how she wins. Okay. Let's just put it right out there. So fine. Champion, sexual. Yes.
That's what they meant by queen.
So yeah, Ruth, there's so many feminist aspects, and yet you have to consider, like, this is during the time of the judges. This is also, oh my God, are we going to talk about Listen. You have a man who makes this crazy vow, who knows who's at his house. He knows who's at his house. And he goes, whoever comes out, fine. It's like that scene in Fleabag where she goes, I'm going to sleep with the next person that comes into this cafe. And her dad walks in and she goes, this is rough. And but it's this level of, like, she also runs this cafe where literally nobody comes into it except for random family members at random times here and there. Like, when you're Jephthah and you're going, the first person that comes out of my house, I'm going to kill him. Like, it's going to be your wife or your daughter. Who do you think is going to come out? And yet,
it's like they talk about like how she like agrees to it somehow, and it's like she probably was just like, she didn't have a choice. It's not like she really had a choice.
She did not have a choice.
You
and
get
yet,
to
at
either
the same
willingly
time,
choose to die, or we're gonna.
At the same time, she is also this very pious creature. She is made out to be this like virginal goddess of sorts, and that's beautiful. And I think what we do have to recognize in all of these conversations, and I hate this fact, but sometimes victims do not respond in the way that we would think they or want them to respond, right? And so she in this text, granted, we don't know, one, if this is real, or two,
who wrote that text,
right? Or if that was her response, or if they're just using it as a tale to laud sacrifices of some sort. However, there's this aspect of like, sometimes we put words in victims' mouths, and that's not, sometimes people want to stay with their abuser. Sometimes, you have this figure and she considers it an honor to die on behalf of her father. Like, you have to still allow victims and survivors their agency, even if you disagree with their stuff. And I don't love that, because even right.
And all of that
and yet,
is
then you bring in child sacrifice in general, and how judges itself would view child sacrifice in this cycle of idol worship, et cetera, et cetera. So it gets more complex than that, and it's hard to cover that in such a short amount of time. You could do like 2 hours on Jephthah's daughter. Oh my goodness.
So I just want to note, like, all of that is absolutely true, and I think it's incredibly important to say. Something I feel like I just have to continually point out to people is that we don't know for sure who wrote these texts, right? But almost guaranteed it's a dude. Hands down, a dude wrote it. Yep. And in saying all that, there's probably a reason that the daughter was portrayed in this way, right? Even if it's not historical, if it's completely made up, or if it is historical.
It's like, for educational, ideological purposes. And
yes,
so
and it's teaching women you should be willing to be a victim. You should be happy if it's for the better, if it's for God, if it's for,
I just have a question. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's still happening today. I mean, it happens all the time. I think I said this the other day in one of my videos, that women are taught to sacrifice themselves on the altar of peacekeeping, and peacemaking, because people were asking about one of these women who had been sexually assaulted as a teenager by the pastor for many years and had stayed in the church for like generations or decades after. And people were like, why would she stay? Right. And it was like, I think I ended the video, right. I ended the video by saying we should not be asking why she stayed. We should be asking why the church taught her, or we shouldn't be asking why she didn't leave. We should be asking why the institution, the church, taught her that she should stay. That's the question we need to be asking, right? And so we have women that are in these situations, and they're taught, like, well, if you bring this to light, if you harm, it's going to harm people, right? It's going to harm by people, it's going to harm the pastor, it's going to harm the person who did it, right? And it's okay that, like, you should be effectively a willing sacrifice to make sure that, like, more turmoil doesn't come, right? Like, nobody else gets harmed because you came out with the truth. Like, and you see it in so many insidious ways at all levels of the church. And I think it starts with, like, women, you should submit to men, even if you think they're wrong. The fuck I look like? Like, no, but that's what you're taught, right? If you're told, if you get married, you should submit to your husband. So for some people, it's more extreme, where it's like, you don't even get to say a word. But the way I was taught, and like, I wouldn't say I was progressive church by any stretch of the imagination, but like, it wasn't like a strictly like women shut up, right? It was more like, well, you have the right to like discuss with your husband and give ideas and do whatever, but ultimately, ultimately he gets the final say, and you just need to go with it, even if you think it's wrong. Trust that God is working through your husband. No. No.
Well, so, because, like, here's the thing, is that it's something that's Alexiana, are you on TikTok? Like, even if you don't like make TikTok, have you like watched any of the so there's someone
I have too much ADHD, so I just wait for it to like take a few weeks before it makes the rounds on Instagram. I don't need another app to ruin me.
I mean, completely understand.
Took over my life.
So I Blame Bill she'll talk about vertical morality versus horizontal morality.
Yeah.
And how like the problem is that the fact that women get hurt, the fact that women are being abused is a byproduct to them. It's like an unfortunate side effect because the real victim is God. God is the one that gets hurt.
Yeah.
It's not like, and so it's like, well, God's going to take care and like heal the people that have been harmed. But but like they really like, that's why it's all treated the same. But it's also why like it's like it makes small things way bigger than they should be, and
it absolves responsibility
smaller than they should be, because it's like, who cares if these women aren't getting the support they need? Once they die and they go to heaven, God's going to heal their soul.
You just have to have an eternal perspective, which just means we don't give a shit what we do here on Earth.
Basically, Dr. Josh says that he always heard headship taught as the relationship between a boss and the employee. Each person has a role, and sometimes the right person has to still submit to the wrong person.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Is my husband paying me by any chance? Like, I totally get that. I'm just like, a man can be as wrong as he wants. Just run me that check.
So in like a traditional evangelical household where the mom is a stay-at-home mom, and so all of the income comes from the guy, like they would kind of see it that way, being like, hey, like, like we're paying for the house, we're paying for the food, we're paying for
to survive, right? Because women's work
survival
is nothing.
So this one's like a really
one, women aren't supposed to do actual work. Sorry, and two, women's work in the household is valued at.
Yes.
So, and we see that in the like our regular economy, but especially in the church, that like, oh no, the ability to stay home and like raise kids is actually, this is like your highest calling. You're a blessing. You should. This is what you should want. Like, okay.
And good for women who think that and want that, right? Like, right.
Yeah, totally. That's fine. I don't have anything against wanting to be a stay-at-home mom. I have
choice.
It's not that.
Right?
It's that when a man is saying, this is your highest good, this is your calling, you shouldn't even feel like work. It shouldn't feel like work. You should love it so much. Like, dude, have you ever stayed up all night with a kid once? No, it's not for me.
No, and people should get paid
not
for it.
Free.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Get paid for that.
Yeah. Sorry, we can go to the next question quickly.
Yeah, sorry.
Something about not calling out.
Oh, yeah. That's in Deuteronomy 22.
That's in Deuteronomy 22.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So, and then I think this is our last question.
Oh, sorry. I was like...
Oh, I guess it's not really a question. It's just a
also, it's
commentary on
Deuteronomy
mindset.
22, 25 through 27.
$5 a month allowance?
Wait, who got $5 allowance?
I just saw that comment. My ex used to generously give me a $5 a month allowance.
What? Men are canceled. All of them.
No joke.
Sorry, that's not funny. It's also just what? Sorry.
Laughing at that as a trauma response. It's fine.
All men. Dr. Josh.
Like laughing, I laugh so that I don't cry because I already cried once on this stream. But like the fucking audacity. Like what the fuck?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
I also laugh when really terrible things happen. Like I can't stop. So
again, it's a trauma response. Just putting it out
I am a walking trauma response at this point.
Many of us are.
Well, okay. So I think that was all the questions. Sorry, we did go a bit over. I anticipated
good.
we might. That was
I figured.
super interesting and fun. And actually, I feel like we didn't even cover a lot of the same stuff that we did in the first videos, so that'll be
No,
awesome.
I'm
I can
grateful.
release
I'm
that.
really grateful.
Yeah. And then we will reschedule with Dr. O'Donnell. I can't wait to hear from her.
For real.
So she does more trauma theology, I think, not specific to the Hebrew Bible. Hebrew Bible is Alexiana's sort of area. So I think there will be even more to discuss then. And I think I'd love to talk about it all, because I think so much of it is still relevant. And
yes, it is.
Like you said, the Bible is still being wielded as this weapon, and it's a weapon against very specific people groups.
Yes.
So I think it's worth continuing to talk about. And I think especially for both men and women that have been traumatized, it is important and interesting and healing to view these texts that might have been part of your traumatization through a lens that is actually beneficial and healing for you, because it's one that is not focused on the abuser.
Correct.
So anyway, Dr. Alexiana Fry, thank you so much for being here today. Correa, thank you for joining us at the last minute.
For real.
And all of you wonderful people that tuned in, thank you. I love you. Like, subscribe, do all the things, make baby Jesus cry, as Vice Rhino would say. And on that note, see y'all next time. Bye.